Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Lovecast. You are listening to episode 144. We're going to call this one Truth versus Belief. Truth versus Belief. How are you guys? Hope you guys are doing well. It's another week. And by another week, I don't mean the same week. I don't mean that it's another mundane week. I mean, it's a brand new, completely new week. We've never, at least not in our conscious memories, ever experienced this before. Okay. And I say that to say that we're living in extraordinary times. And people sometimes will say, well, what do you mean by extraordinary? And sometimes I like to ask people, like, are you living an ordinary life or not? And someone says, you know, I'm living an ordinary life and I don't like it. And so sometimes we like to ask, you know, well, what kind of life would you like to live? And they're saying, you know, I want to live just a life of meaning and a life of significance. I want to do great things with my life. And I love that. I love that because I think that's a drive that all of us have as human beings. And there's really one way to do that. There's only really one way to make something out of your life, to accomplish something great with your life. And that is we really have a need, a strong need to learn what it means to be extraordinary. You know, the word extraordinary simply just means extraordinary. So if you don't like your ordinary life the way it is, it's a sign that you need to be extraordinary. You need to learn how to love the ordinary life even more than you do now. Does that make sense? So the word extraordinary is simply extraordinary. So if you want to learn what it means to actually enjoy the ordinary, I'm talking about like getting up in the morning. I'm talking about like making your bed and making coffee and eating good food and drinking good water and having a, you know, robust, quiet inner life. Like, isn't that sound exciting and fantastic and invigorating? If it doesn't, if that seems really boring to you, then you're probably never going to do anything of importance in your life. Interesting, isn't it? You're probably never going to go on to do anything important because you haven't learned the beauty of the ordinary. And when you learn the beauty of the ordinary, you will actually become extraordinary. You see what I'm doing there? You will become extraordinary or extraordinary. And that's really when you do good things and great things with your life. Obviously, that's what I do in coaching. We help people get really, 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 really fall in love with the ordinary existence that is miraculous. And that then we will become cravers of the extraordinary or the extraordinary, because this is what we get every single day. So I could say more about that, but how are you guys doing? I hope you're doing well. Hey, got some good news. Okay, got some good news. We do have a hotline, as you may know. Yes, we have a hotline. The number to the Lovecast hotline. And we've had it for a few weeks. It's still a new thing, okay? Because we haven't had this for very long, only like 3 or 4 episodes or whatever. But let me give you the number, just in case, because I like to give out this number every time, because you may not know the number. It has that has occurred to me. So I'm not assuming that you know the number. So get a piece of construction paper out, maybe get a crayon and write this number down. Okay, here it is. You ready? 909-747-9648. Again, that's 909-747-9648. And you can call this hotline. You can leave your voicemail on the hotline. You could even text the hotline. So either way, if you want to text, if you have a question, a comment, a pushback, you can leave it as a text. You can call in and actually leave your voice, which, look, you can do either, but I kind of prefer the voice. I love to hear people's voices, but you know, no pressure either way. Maybe you're in a hurry, or maybe you don't want your voice to be played on the podcast. That's totally fine. So texts are fine, but I love the voicemails. And today I'm going to play a voicemail for you from a I think a longtime listener, and it was such a great It was actually such a great comment. This was actually a comment, and I think even maybe a little bit of a pushback from our last episode, episode 143, which was, I will say, a kind kind of a controversial episode because I was challenging the idea that that the way to actually stand up for justice and to have a peaceful life and a good life and a productive life is to stand for nothing. Because whenever we stand for something, we actually are in resistance, and what we resist persists. Well, it was a little bit controversial. I totally get that. And this caller had some input that I thought was really good, and it was actually a pushback as well, if I'm understanding him correctly. So what I like to do is play his voicemail to the hotline, and then I want to have a few points to share in response to this caller's comment. All right, here we go.
Hi, Jamal. This is Tony Schumann from Carlisle, Pennsylvania. I just want to say thank you for all that you do. I listen to you all the time. I love how provocative you are, because your goal in all this is to inspire people to do their best in life, therefore to be happy. I know that. You're my brother eternally. But today, it's Thursday, the 18th of February. I'm listening to your podcast, and you're provocative again. And I just want to make sure that other people know where you're coming from, because when you say, if we are a believer in something, and you know this is going to stir up emotions, if we believe in something, that we become closed-minded, and that therefore you don't allow others to enter into anything you have to say. Well, this is probably true in most cases, except for one case. That's to believe in Jesus, the real Jesus. I'm not talking about the institutional Jesus or the Jesus that these preachers, these irrelevant preachers preach all the time. I'm talking about the Jesus that says that we are one family, and you're my brother, and I'm in you, and you're in me. That's the main thing that Jesus taught. He didn't teach it. He wasn't talking about sin all the time. He was talking about we're one family. That's the way it started. That's the way it's going to be. And if we're in that mindset as we live this life, we'll be the happiest people that we can be. So that when you say to be a believer in something, you infer that that's bad. I agree with you, but it's not true in the case of believing in Jesus Christ, because that was the start of everything good. And Jesus Christ is normal life.
Tony, thank you very, very much for your call into the hotline and your voicemail. You bring up some really, really good points that I'd like to address. And actually, just when I listened to your voicemail, I just thought, yeah, this is a great point. That obviously I think we're coming at it from a different perspective. This is why I want to address it in this podcast episode. But I think, there's several things. First, what you bring up, I think, is on the mind of a lot of people. And so, and plus we're taught at some level, there's certain things that we should be open about. There's certain things that we should observe, and then there's certain things that we just need to have some kind of like blind belief or just basis for, okay, we just believe these things. And, I want to push back on that a little bit, even when it comes to believing in people like Jesus, because I think if we'll take a closer look at what spiritual leaders have done. And Jesus, I consider to be, I'm a huge fan of Jesus. And what I mean by that is I recognize the substance of what Jesus taught. And I recognize it as truth. I don't believe it as truth. Again, we're going back to this. It's not just semantics. I'm going somewhere with this. I don't believe, in Jesus in the sense of like, first of all, believing in the person of Jesus. This may sound a little crazy to you or heretical or however you want to put this. I think that's missing the point when we talk about, do you believe in Jesus or do you believe in, or do you not believe in Jesus? I think that's like asking, do you believe in your spouse or do you not believe in your spouse? That can mean something different. Like, do you have confidence in her or that kind of thing? I would say this, Jesus, since nobody here has interacted with the physical Jesus who walked on the earth 2,000 years ago, because again, that was 2,000 years ago. We're living in a very different time period. Since none of us have interacted with that person, what we have is a record of obviously his life that he lived, things that he has done, things that happened in history. We have a historical record, and we also have the teachings, at least some of them that have been recorded through word of mouth and people who were his contemporaries who wrote down a lot of what he taught. So we have those, and when we have those teachings, we can recognize there's a quality about them that ring true to us. Again, truth is self-evident. One of the things I love about some of our founding documents in the United States, the Declaration of Independence, says we find these truths to be self-evident. I would say all truth is self-evident. And here's where I want to push back a little bit, Tony, on what you were saying. I don't think if you read the words of Jesus, Jesus was ever asking people to just blindly trust him. That was not his message. Actually, Jesus had a message, and it had nothing. And actually, Jesus' message was not about him. Yeah, are you aware of that? Like, if you read now, we over the course of time look back and we kind of put these spiritual figures up on a pedestal. We kind of put Jesus up on this pedestal, and we kind of make an idol out of. I believe people have made an idol out of him, and that's a lot of what religions have done. The Christian traditional religion has done. They put Jesus on a pedestal and made an idol out of him. But if you really understand the heart of Jesus and the heart of Jesus' teachings, you will see that it actually was not about him. Yeah, he was not encouraging people to believe in him. He was not. That is what the church has done. If you look at the essence of Jesus' teaching, what he was doing was quite profound. He actually had a message. There are these verses in the Gospels, in the Synoptic Gospels that are included in the New Testament. And it said that Jesus would go around traveling and he would preach the gospel of the kingdom. Yeah. He would preach what was called the gospel of the kingdom, which the word gospel just means good news. And so he was traveling, having a message. Now, if you grew up in the church, grew up, in traditional Christianity, when you hear about Jesus, you're hearing about what's considered the gospel or the message of the good news is the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. That's typically the message when people talk about sharing the gospel or this is the gospel. It's traditionally about Jesus died on the cross for your sins. He rose from the dead, on the third day, and this is kind of that message. But what's interesting is that was not Jesus' message. So when Jesus was going around preaching in these villages and taking his message to the Jewish people, that was not his message because obviously that had not happened yet. So I've always been curious, as to what was his message. Like, what was that message that Jesus was talking about? Because obviously he hadn't been killed. There was no death and resurrection. And so he wasn't going around telling people, hey, guys, you all need to believe in me. That wasn't his message. Hey, guys, everyone should just believe in me because let me tell you who I am. He never did that, actually. If you read the crux of his teaching, it's phenomenal. What he was doing is he was teaching people, helping people recognize. That's a key word right there, recognize. Recognize the way nature, the way the universe works. And he would just point out things. So again, he was not teaching people to believe in him. He was not teaching people to just have these blind faiths and these certain tenets, these certain dogmas, these certain doctrines. He did not do that. If you read the teachings of Jesus, what he was doing is he was saying, hey, and this is coming from Matthew chapter 6, but I'm paraphrasing here. But what he would do is he would say, he was talking to his followers, his disciples, and he would say, hey, I know, look around at the world and see everybody. They're just going to work and they're, I'm paraphrasing here, but they're all worried about how they're going to eat, how they're going to, what clothes they're going to wear. Because again, he's addressing the survival mindset. They're all worried about how they're going to survive. He's like, I just want you to observe that. So observe how the world works. Look at the stress levels that people are operating under. And then he says, it shall not be so with you. And then he says, now look at nature, look at the birds, look how they live, look how they're so well provided for. A bird, their territory is the whole world. Whatever they need to build their nest and, feed their babies, it's all right there. They have access to it. Look at the lilies of the field, look at how they are so beautiful and, and he was pointing out, and he's like, and how much more valuable are you? He's like, if this is true in nature, if you can just observe nature and look how abundant it is, how well cared for it is, he's like, how much more true is that for you? And so he's pointing out a reality. Has nothing to do with belief here. He's teaching people to recognize the way reality works. That's what truth is. Truth isn't a belief. It's not a doctrine. It's not a set of principles that you just have blind faith in. And Jesus wasn't teaching people to do that, in my understanding. He wasn't even talking about himself, really. He was just saying, hey, look, this is how it works in the world. This is how the earth, look at the abundance of the earth. Look at how these lilies are just so beautifully adorned and how they're clothed. And he's like, and yet you couldn't do this if you tried. So basically he was saying, hey, don't worry. Everything that you need will come to you. But and he was saying, seek first this place. And he was teaching people to understand, because he's made this statement to the people he was talking to the Jewish people. He made the statement. He said, the kingdom that you are looking for, this whole, because it's typical that people who live miserable lives, they look to escape their life, into something else. And in the Jewish vernacular that day, they were looking for the Messiah to come and save the day and usher in this new, kingdom in which everything's going to be great again. It's kind of like, instead of make America great again, it's like, let's make Israel great again. Their heyday was in the past, in the Old Testament, when David was their king, and they were all looking to get back to that heyday. They were just miserable, living under the rule of the Romans, and they wanted to escape their reality, and they wanted the Messiah to come and make Israel great again, right? Totally, it's what they wanted. And he was looking at them, and he just said, hey, that kingdom, this is using their vernacular, he said, it's in your midst. He actually said that. He said, it's actually within you. He said that to these folks who were totally miserable. He was saying the thing you're looking for, hoping for, that's going to change everything, yeah, it's already here. It's actually within you. You've had it the whole time. That has nothing to do with belief, people. That's nothing to do with belief. And that actually, he wasn't even talking about himself. Yeah, he wasn't. I know we've been taught that. He was just saying, recognize it. Look, it's already within you. He was teaching people how to recognize truth. Then he would say things like, hey, when you know the truth, it'll make you free. You'll experience, very experiential. Or he would say things like, hey, you're thinking, I'm paraphrasing here, but he would say, your thinking is twisted, but even you with your thinking being twisted and you being off and having your priorities way off, if your child came to you and asked you for something to eat, you wouldn't give him a rock. That's actually a teaching that Jesus gave in one of the Gospels. He's saying, if your child came to you, you wouldn't give him a rock if he was hungry. You'd give him a piece of bread, You wouldn't give him a snake if he wanted something to eat. No, you would give him what he needed. And he was saying, look, can you recognize that quality of love that you have already? He was saying that's how it is with God, the source. And so he was teaching people to recognize the source of creation, the source of the universe is just like that. And this is, you can even see it in yourself, and you're even messed up. You got your thinking, and your thinking's all twisted. Basically, I'm paraphrasing. Some translations say, you being evil know how to give good gifts to your children. Well, that's a bad translation when it says evil. It's not, he's not calling people evil. He's saying the thinking is twisted, which is kind of where we get the word wicked, which really it comes from the root word of wicker, which is twisted. That's what he's kind of the essence of what he's getting at. So he's like, you being, twisted in your thinking, even you already know how to give good gifts to your children. How much more true is that of the source of creation, God, whatever word you want to use there? But he's doing something. Can you see what he's doing there? Yeah, he's not talking about belief. He's appealing to what you already know. He's appealing to what you can understand. Does this make sense? He's appealing to reality, truth versus belief. So, when people talk about believing in Jesus, that's a bit, in my understanding, that's not the point. It's not about whether you believe in Jesus or not. Jesus' whole message was about helping people recognize what truth is. Like truth, gravity. Like if you know what truth is. Truth is just what it is. It has nothing to do with belief. It's like if you pick up a rock and drop it, it's going to fall on the ground. That's showing you there's a truth there. Oh, there's a force that pulls everything to the ground. That's called gravity. Yeah, there's a force that pulls things towards the greater mass. That which has lesser mass, it gets pulled to that which has greater mass. That's an actual energetic force. It's called gravity. It's truth. It's a truth. It's not a belief. You can observe it. And how do you know the truth? Through observation. Let me say that again, in case you might have missed that. How do you know the truth? Not because of belief. You know the truth through observation. It's what you observe. And whatever you observe, that's called enlightenment. That's called consciousness. You see through consciousness. It takes light to see anything. So that's why we call it enlightenment. You just observe it. There's no belief. You don't have to be for it. You don't have to be against it. It's just you observe it. It's just plain. So this is where we get confused when we talk about, belief versus truth. They're very different things. Now, you believe things that you don't know, that you don't observe. That's where a belief comes in. Again, beliefs aren't bad or good. I kind of look at them as like hypotheses. These are theories that we come up with. They may be true, but we don't know that. Okay, so that's what a belief is, if we're going to look at that. But when you know something, it's because of observation. Again, going back to that passage in the Bible, be still and know that I am God, or be still and know that I am. Because I am God is redundant. I am is really probably the most apt description of what God is. It's just being, pure consciousness, being itself. So how do you know that? How do you know being? How do you experience consciousness? Just through stillness. It's there. How do you even know? I always tell people, how do you know yourself? You have to get quiet enough to be aware of yourself. How do you know God? You have to get quiet enough to be aware of God. Same thing. Consciousness, just being. That is the essence that gives rise to everything in the universe. Just that being. Does this make sense? It's nothing to do with belief. So if you want to know this, you just get still. It's there. You just observe. Oh, I notice when I get still, there's a presence. Yeah, what is that? That's you. That's also the divine. It's consciousness. That's how do you know that? You just observe it. You just observe it in the stillness. It's nothing to do with belief, people. This is not about belief. This is about observation. Truth comes by recognition of truth comes by observation, not by belief. Okay? Hope that makes sense. And then you can recognize things that Jesus said, like he would say things like, He even said this, and again, addressing Tony's point, Jesus never said, hey, I want you to just believe in me. He said, if you don't believe me, believe the works that I do. So he's, again, pointing, look, observe what I'm doing. Jesus would do these things. He would bend the nature of reality, or what people thought were the limitations. That's what we call miracles and works. They're just, what's interesting is that when you start to tap into different dimensions of existence, of being, you realize that the physical world is subservient to these other dimensions, like consciousness. We have, science is catching up with this. What we are learning in quantum physics is demonstrating this, that just by meditating in front of water will actually, at a molecular level, the structure of water changes. There have been experiments done that demonstrate this. The molecular structure of water actually changes depending upon the consciousness of a person who's meditating upon it. They've done a number of experiments that actually show this. That's showing you that consciousness actually, once you tap into the dimension of consciousness, you can manipulate or change the what was considered in the past, what most scientists are trained, what they're called materialists or reduction, just materialists in the sense that the material world is preeminent. But what we're understanding in quantum science is that there's another dimension to existence that involves consciousness that actually supersedes the physical dimension of life. That means you can change physical reality through the dimension of consciousness. We are seeing that more and more clearly through what we are understanding at the scientific level when it comes to quantum physics. Now, Jesus was teaching this to observe. He said he was teaching us to look at it and observe it way back. This was and it's not just Jesus. These were spiritual teachers that you can find, especially in the Eastern world. These are concepts that have been taught for thousands of years. Okay, and they teach people how to recognize this other dimension of reality called consciousness. And this is where typically religious folks, people who are raised in Christian ideas, tend to miss the very point of Jesus and the very point of his teachings, which is not about himself, it was all about how to recognize reality. Okay. And he embodied that reality. He would say, I am the way. So with the way he lived, he was saying, look, I am demonstrating for you this way. There's a verse, John chapter 14, he said, 6. It's a famous verse, John 14:6. He says, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. And so a lot of people think that when he says truth, we're talking about some belief or some proposition. It's not. Truth simply is another way of saying reality. The word can be translated as reality. It's like, I'm the reality. I'm embodying this way of reality. So what is Jesus doing? He's just simply a person who's demonstrating what it looks like to live in alignment with reality. And he's teaching people to, and he would say, look, if you are struggling in life and you are weighed down and burdened, he's like, learn from me because I'm the way. Look at how the way I'm living. And learn from me because my yoke is, the verse in the Bible says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now, why did he say that? Because he was living in a certain way that is in alignment with reality. And he was saying, look, you can do this too. You can learn this way too. I'm embodying that way. This has nothing to do with belief, people. It has absolutely nothing to do with belief. It's observation. It's simply observation of these truths, these universal laws of the universe. And he's teaching people how to recognize that. That's it. He would say, like, so if you don't believe me, believe the works that I do so you can understand this. He said that. So he's not actually even teaching people to believe in him. And then he says, and Tony actually mentioned this in his call, he said, belief in Jesus is all about believing that, he is in us and we are one family, one human family. And we're all, we're not separated through race or creed and these kind of things, which is true. That's a truth, right? But Tony was appealing to say, if we believe in Jesus, then we'll believe that that's how the world works. And again, I want to push back on that a little bit. Jesus never said that. What he did say, and the way he said it, the manner in which he said it, this comes out of, I think it's John, to give you an example, it's recorded in the in the Synoptic Gospels, but in John chapter 14, verse 20, he says, in that day you will know, or some translations say you will see. There we go again. It's all about recognition. You will see. In that day, you will begin to recognize. This has nothing to do with belief. If you see something for yourself, it's not belief, it's observation. He said, in that day, you will see that I am in you, that the Father is in me, God, the source, is in me, and I am in you, and you are in one another. We are in one another. So it's basically saying that unity that Tony was referring to in his call. In that day, you will see that. You will know that. You will recognize that. So again, this has nothing to do with belief. If people who take the time to recognize the nature of life will see that we are all interconnected. Yeah, we're all interconnected. It's amazing. All human beings, different races and creeds, and we affect each other. We're all of the same essence, the same source, and we're very interconnected. Yes. And the same consciousness that exists in me. It's like if you blow 2 or 3 bubbles, if you ever do blow the bubbles and you have these bubbles floating out there, it looks like they look separate, right? But inside the bubble is what? It's air, right? So you pop the bubble and the same air that's in 2 or 3 or 4 bubbles is all the same air. And it's the same thing. What is that air a metaphor for? Well, it's consciousness, being, right? So the same being, the same consciousness that inhabits all living things is the same. It's literally the same consciousness that inhabits and manifests all living things. So when the form of those things dies or goes away, then what are we left with? Just pure consciousness, pure being, right? And Jesus is saying, look, in that day, you're going to recognize that same essence, the source, which he would call his Father, the Father is in me and I am in you and we are in one another. Like it's that same essence of being, of oneness, that transcends the limitations of form, and you will recognize that is what is our essence that's in all of us. Nothing about belief here. Absolutely nothing about belief. It's all about recognition. I hope that makes sense. Truth versus belief. Belief has nothing to do with truth. Belief is just a proposition that you're like an educated guess, a hypothesis, something that somebody said, but it's something you don't really know. Truth is something you observe. And so spiritual leaders, anybody worth their time, anybody worth their listening to, are never going to point to themselves. They're going to teach you. A true spiritual leader or teacher of any kind should always empower you and teach you how to recognize for yourself what is. That's all it is. They should not point to themselves. And if you look at Jesus, he's a great leader. He never pointed. I don't think he was just telling people. He wasn't building a fan base in which he was saying, hey, guys, everyone just follow me for the sake of me. No. He was, when he said follow me in that vernacular, first of all, he's speaking to a Jewish audience in which at that day was very similar to, a guru like in India would have a following and they would listen to this teacher. That's kind of what he was referring to. But then he would teach. And what was the teaching? It had nothing to do with him. No, it had nothing to do with him. It was all about how to recognize reality. So I hope that answers your question, Tony. I hope that addresses, again, I appreciate your call and I appreciate what you brought up because I believe that's actually something that a lot of folks have, this I think my last episode about I was it could come across a little bit harsh on people who were quote unquote believers. What I'm trying to bring out is the fact that there's no belief necessary. We can move beyond belief just through recognition. And again, this is true of our own life. I always say, and I always tell people, even in coaching, even in the coaching process, people say, well, I'm really trusting you. You're going to help me overcome this issue or this issue when I'm working with clients. And I always say, no, don't trust me. I'm just going to point out some things that you already know, number one. Because when I do that, people resonate with it. It's like, you already know. And then I'm going to ask you to do certain things to implement the things that you already know that we talk about. And if it works for you, then do it. Don't just believe me. Just see if it works. Give it some time. Put the actions into place and see if it works. If it works, you don't need to believe me. You can see for yourself that it works. It's the same thing. We don't need more belief. We need We need to be conscious and aware and recognize what is. That's what truth is. Okay? Hope that makes sense, guys. Thank you. Again, please call the hotline. Again, the hotline, it's fairly new to this podcast, but as you can see, it's essential to have these conversations, to use the hotline. You can text it. Again, you can call, leave your voicemail like Tony did. Tony, thank you again for putting yourself out there and sharing your thoughts. I think they're important. It really helps us have this conversation. But if you're listening to this today and you just have a comment, it doesn't have to be a question. It doesn't have to be a disagreement. It can be. Maybe it's just a thought, something you learned, something that maybe it's a question you have. Please, no matter what it is, let me encourage you to call the hotline 909-747-9648. Again, it's 909-747-9648. Also, I haven't mentioned this, but please, if you can go to iTunes, rate and review this podcast. It really helps the podcast. So just write a little review, what you're getting out of it, rate it, how many stars you think it's worth. And just the more that we do that, the more you help the podcast get visibility. Okay. And don't forget the hotline 909-747-9648. Let us know what you think. Okay. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.